Welcome, everybody, to our podcast on what it takes to survive brokerage. Myself, Bill Condon, and Matt McGregor are joined by our two young superstars on our team, Bob Santucci, who's been on our team for about 5 or 6 years.
I was going to say he's not young anymore.
He's not young anymore. He's not young.
Savvy veteran.
He's a vet.
That's
yeah.
right.
Bob was our Rookie of the Year after year one and has continued to do great things in his career. So it's great to have Bob joining us today. And we have Jack Murphy, who's about a year into the business and doing some amazing things after year one. So guys, thanks for joining us. And we're going to talk a lot about some of the successes that you guys have had and some of the approaches that you're taking to have success early on in your career. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm really excited about this topic. I get a lot of calls from brokers and even clients that don't understand brokers. So I think this is going to be a great podcast for those two things. So first question, guys, what are the keys to surviving the first couple of years of brokerage? And why do some folks fail? So you guys have been tremendously successful. What would you say are the keys to surviving those first couple of years?
I would say it's really having the right mentors and being on the right team and understanding kind of somewhat what to expect. I mean, it's kind of a sink or swim business in some ways, but I think being able to have the highs not be too high and the lows not too low is really important, because the first year especially, there's a lot of ups and downs. And to me, it's really being able to have senior leadership in place and being able to talk to folks that are going to give you good advice like you guys, and understanding that there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, and being able to kind of ride those waves.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I would say just being a sponge, taking everything in and, looking at what your mentors are doing, and then also looking at what the competition's doing, because that really teaches you what's going on in the market, how to be a broker, and how to reach out to the people you're trying to serve.
Yeah, and I have the opportunity to interview a lot of people that are trying to get into the industry, and they ask, what does it take to have success early on? And the points you guys certainly made are absolutely the case, but also, and people say this all the time, but work ethic, right? You get in and there's so much to learn, and the only thing you can do when you're starting out is control what you can control, and that's how hard you work, right? And so we find all the time that guys like you that have success are in working extremely hard from the get-go and cold calling, doing all the things that you need to do to go have success. But nothing replaces hard work when you're starting out.
That's a great point. And as you guys know, I read a lot of sales books early on in my career and continue to do so. And I don't remember who said this, so I won't take credit for it, but somebody did. And they said there's two kinds of pain. There's the pain of discipline and there's the pain of regret. And I feel like if you're disciplined mostly early on in that brokerage career, because you have to be successful in your first couple of years. If you're not, it's going to be a long haul, right? So you got to be disciplined and be okay with the pain of that discipline. You don't always want to make those cold calls. But the pain of discipline, I think, outweighs the pain of regret.
Absolutely.
So what is the hardest thing about brokerage early on? What stories from you guys? What's the hardest thing?
It's those those highs and those lows, right? I mean, some days you come in, you make a couple good calls, and you kind of get some momentum going, and you just feel so good. I mean, it just feels so good to make those early on connections, have some big wins in the business. But then you have those days where you have a loss, and you feel like you thought something was going to go and it doesn't go. Or one story I had where I was way down the road on a deal with an ops manager. I thought he was the guy. We had toured, we had gone down the road, and then we were actually at leases on a proposal, and then the CEO of the company came in and said, "What are you doing?" Basically, the ops manager,
Oh, no.
You're not the guy. We've got a relationship.
That's the worst.
This guy's out of here. Yeah. And, it was, I think, my 6th month in the business, and so it felt terrible.
For sure.
And there are those, those big lows when you don't really know what you're doing all the way, and you kind of, those things happen. I think you just got to kind of ride those lows, and they'll come back around. I mean, oftentimes you'll have things that look like losses, and they come back, and you end up getting them the next deal, right? And you always have to have that mindset of, it's okay,
sure.
and I'll go get the next one.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because year one, deals fall apart, right?
All the time.
But they're losses at the time, but you actually learn from them, right? So you learn how to qualify more, right? You learn that, hey, in addition to the ops manager, I need to make sure that that person has executive approval to move forward. So you learn from those losses, and then you become better and better from those things that fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, one thing that was really difficult for me was coming to the understanding of how much time it does take. how much you have to learn and how much work you have to put in from the jump. You kind of expect these big things that you're going to jump in and kill it right away, but you don't understand how much time and effort it actually does take to be successful.
Jack, that's a good point. All really good brokers come into my office 6-7 months into the industry and they say the same thing. I'm frustrated that I don't have more traction, right? And it's because you have that mentality that you are going to be successful, right? And but you're right. It takes a good 6 to 9 months to get going, because you think about people that are moving, they're planning a year in advance, right? And they have relationships. And so it takes a little bit of time to get going. But all the really good brokers are frustrated after 6 months because they want to be further ahead.
Absolutely.
That's right. One of the things I remember being young is getting big leagued by brokers, and it is horrible.
It's the wrong mentality.
So senior brokers out there, remember, we were all once young in the business. Treat the guys nice. I always try to make them look good in front of their clients, because I can remember some of the senior brokers, man. You bring a group through a tour of one of their buildings, you ask the wrong question, they look at you like you're just an idiot,
yeah.
and then they'll call you kind of an idiot, and so getting big leagued early on certainly was painful.
Yeah, and I'm sure we all have stories, but
yeah.
And sometimes when you're young in the industry, right, you just won't get callbacks from other brokers, right? Which again is
painful.
It doesn't help you be successful.
That's right. That's right. Guys, what about live cold calling? So it seems to me to be a little bit of a lost art. Maybe I'm just old school. But early on in my career, and I think Bill's career, we kind of split time a little bit. We spent a lot of time in the field, and I feel like maybe with technology, just the way it's going, younger brokers don't do it as much. And I don't know if that's because it's hard or really it's not as relevant anymore. Talk to us about that.
I would say it's super relevant, and I think it's super important your first year in the business to really allocate about 6 to 8 months of focusing on those live calls. I would say that more than anything, you just learn so much from popping into someone's office or learning about the warehouses, learning about how trucks come in and out of the parking lots, and you get some valuable information by just talking to people who are in the office. You talk to warehouse workers, you talk to people who work in the business park. So there's so much hands-on knowledge that you don't know and you can't learn from Googling something or just looking something up.
I would echo that. I would say it's still relevant, certainly. I did it, probably didn't put in the full 6 to 8 months where I was completely dedicated to it, like I know Jack did. And there definitely is benefit. Particularly, you walk in, you may see really heavy parking. You may not be able to find a spot to park when you're going to go try and make a live call. That's a clear tell that they probably have some needs, or maybe you're outgrowing their facility, right? So that's something you can bring up when you are able to connect with that decision maker. For me, I found I was so much more efficient making phone calls, one, just from a timing standpoint, right? Because you can go one after the other. You can make 5 cold calls on the phone in one live call's time. So that was one thing that was more efficient. And then 2, it's a lot easier to get through to decision makers when you are on the phone, I find.
For sure.
So I think there's still definitely a place for it early on. To Jack's point, you do need to do it. You need to get down. You need to see the buildings. You need to really see the market. But I am pretty effective on Google Earth, using CoStar, looking at aerials, and being able to really see how things work, even just online. So I do think, Matt, it has changed a bit with the technology out there and how easy it is to find businesses on Google Maps, on Google Earth. And so you're able to be pretty effective without going down there live.
That's right.
But I do think a mixed bag approach is still necessary.
To add to that, I don't think there's a wrong approach to cold calling, right? As long as you're cold calling, whether you're doing it live or whether you're doing it on the phone,
that's right.
You're doing something right. For me, and this was 15 years ago, back in my day, right?
You were a great live caller.
I would call. I just went down there every day. I'd pack a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and just spend the day down there knocking on doors and collecting business cards. But it helped me really learn the market, right? I mean, I didn't know where Kent was when I got into the business, right? Now I'm in love with it. But I'd go down there the first 6 months and just cold call every day, and it helped me. And then after about 6 months, I took a Dave Hibbard cold calling training class.
The best.
And he's fantastic. Yeah, we had him in here a couple months ago, and he's great.
Yeah, he was awesome.
And I just started calling on the phone, and it was extremely efficient way to do it. But there's not a wrong way, whether you're calling live in person or you're doing it on the phone. As long as you're calling, that's a really good thing.
I mean, going down there and seeing the physical real estate, noticing if a guy's overparked or noticing if a landlord's not taking care of the building or something. Then when you make that follow-up cold call on the phone, you're talking about something relevant directly to that tenant. That's what I always try to do as well.
Absolutely. And when you're making that call, you have that mental image of the building you're talking about, the exact kind of cross streets that they're located at. There's so many things that you can pull that make those dials a lot easier.
That's right. You spoke, Bill, on Dave Hibbard, and Dave Hibbard was just in here a couple weeks ago. So Dave Hibbard, for those that you don't know, you can Google him. Great author and motivational speaker on training brokers in our industry, mostly on cold calling. Talk to us, guys, about the art of cold calling. How do young brokers learn this? It's a tough thing, right? I mean, you got to have thick skin. How do you build that up? What have you guys learned? Was Dave helpful? What has helped you guys become great cold callers? Because you both are.
Consistency. I mean, just trying to do it every single day, allocating. I mean, when you're really just getting started and you are in your first year, you should allocate 2 to 3 hours a day of consistently cold calling. Obviously, as your career kind of takes off and you get a little bit busier with current clients that you're working with, that time may be cut down. But I think just consistency, that builds the thick skin, that builds the kind of the wherewithal to keep going. And it also does motivate you because you start getting motivated by no. You start kind of appreciating the word no a little bit more, and it makes those yeses that much better.
I would echo that it's definitely about consistency. It's definitely about continuing to make those calls. It's like working out. It's like doing anything else. The more you do it, the more comfortable you are, the better you are at it. So, sometimes, we will get busy or you'll have a period of time where there's a lull in your calling activity. And then jumping back in can be a little bit like jumping into cold water. It can take a little bit to get back in a good rhythm or groove. But the key is to continue doing it daily and don't let those lulls where you're not making as many calls go on for too long, because otherwise you will get a little bit rusty. And it's
sure.
It's like getting out of shape. I mean, you need to stay on it and just keep after it.
Yeah, Bob looked at me when he said getting out of shape. I don't know what that was for, but I on that note, I think that the mental approach to cold calling is equally important as anything else, right? You mentioned working out. You can go through the motions and go to the gym and just get a workout in, or you can go really get a workout in, right? And so when you go cold call, you can go through the motions, or you can really go cold call and go get some meetings, right? And have the mental approach of, I'm going to go lock myself in this room and make 50 calls, and or however many calls I need to make, but I'm going to get 4 meetings before I get out of this room. So, the mental approach of grinding through and really, saying, I am going to get a meeting here, I think is really helpful as well.
Yep, I would agree with that. Dave Hibbard does a great job in his training on mindset and really setting an intention before you make calls, because just like Bill just said, you can get in the habit of where you are just going through the motions and then you're just going to get no after no after no. But if you make a call with intentionality and saying, I'm doing this because I'm good at what I do, I enjoy brokerage, I am the right broker for this company, you make that call with that mindset and you're going to get a lot further. And over time, that's going to add to a lot of wins and get you a lot more clients.
Kind of echoing what you were just saying about the mindset piece from Hibbard's training. He echoed that everything that we do in life really is our choice. So we can play, within our career, we can be at a certain level, but we can also choose to work harder and get to that next level. And that was probably my favorite part, the piece that I took the most from.
That's great. Everybody in this room had a great, year one, worked hard. Looking back on it, if you could go back and do year one again, what's the one thing you would do differently?
For me, I would have done a better job of qualifying. You start out, you're making calls, somebody will meet with you, you get them in the car, and then you find out, okay, well, you know what, his boss or her boss has a relationship with somebody else. And so I think the one thing that I would have done differently is just qualifying to make sure that whoever it is that you're working with is the decision maker or has the authority to make real estate decisions.
For sure.
You heard my story from year one. 6 months in, I had an experience where I went all the way down the road with a guy that really wasn't the decision maker, didn't have the authority. So I would agree with that, Bill, certainly. For me, that, in addition to just kind of making even more calls, working even harder, because I think you can always work harder than you did. And so that's what I've tried to do moving on from year one. But in hindsight, there were moments where I wasn't, making as many calls as I probably should have or could have. And I certainly think that if I had that right mindset, I talked about some of the things I learned from Hibbard and his training and some other things, I think I could have had even a more an approach where I was, making more calls and really acknowledging that I could make a difference. And I think early on in your career, you don't really know, how you can add value. And I think you learn that as you go. So in some sense, I guess that's kind of a challenging one because I maybe didn't know what I didn't know, but I certainly probably would have made even more calls.
Not having the knowledge can sometimes actually be a good thing, because when you're just cold calling, right? When you're early on in the career, you don't know if this company's working with somebody already, and sometimes you might talk yourself out of making a call if you have knowledge. Whereas if you're just going and you don't have that knowledge and you're calling like crazy, or you're willing to pick up the phone and dial anybody's number, that can lead to really great accounts as well.
Yeah, so my point that I was going to make actually is a really good tie into what you were just saying, and it's something that Bob harps on all the time, but it's never making assumptions. I would say that in my first year, I always would make an assumption that maybe this group is working with someone else, or this group doesn't have a need. And so that assumption would build up reluctancies, and I wouldn't make the call. So just never making an assumption and kind of sticking your neck out there is always something that I need to improve on, and something that I wish I did better over this last year.
Looking back on my first year, the one thing that I wish I did differently, and I would encourage young brokers to do differently, is I was so fixated on getting revenue in the door that when I was cold calling, I was fairly efficient with it because I had come from a previous 10 years of sales background, that I would only get excited and really charge forward if there was an immediate requirement. It's a relationship business, and I wish I would have had more thought on longevity of that, because it doesn't matter if somebody has a requirement right now, right? You build the relationship if they want to have a meeting with you, and I was a little too fixated on getting revenue in the door, I think. So, Bill, through the years, now we're kind of the old guys.
Yeah,
and
you're old. You're a lot older. I'm still kind of young.
I have more hair, though.
Yeah,
so.
You do. Yeah.
So, every generation says, gosh, these young guys just don't do it like we did.
Yeah.
And, the old guys that are older than us, would they say that about us? So what's the biggest difference between, the generation across the table from us and kind of the way we approach the business?
Well, I think, a lot has changed, right? Technology has allowed the younger generation to come in and utilize LinkedIn and utilize social media to be able to, put better call lists together. And not necessarily call as cold, right? You're making warm calls. Whereas, when we started, we just call anybody and go down, knock on doors, call anybody up, and go do it that way. Whereas now, you can look up, okay, does this person on LinkedIn, have a relationship with somebody that I know, right? And you can establish a connection that way. So I think what's great is technology has allowed us to make a lot smarter calls. And I will say, I don't think that people today call as much as the generation when we started. I mean, when we started, there was multiple brokers down there cold calling like crazy. You'd run into people in parking lots. You'd run into people you call somebody and they will tell you, hey, we've heard from 5 or 6 different people today, right? And so I think we're really lucky to have 2 people on our team, Jack and Bob, that do actively still put their head down and cold call like crazy. They're not afraid to do it. And so I think we're fortunate in that sense, because that's the name of the game when you're starting out. You have to call.
Exactly.
So Matt, let me ask you something. You 2-time industrial broker of the year for Washington State. You're as successful as anyone really in Colliers from the brokerage standpoint. What do you think it takes to be successful in the industry? Not just kind of maybe walk us through early on in your career, and then as you develop, what does it take to be kind of king of the hill?
Well, I'm definitely not king of the hill, and I think you're only as good as the team that you build around you. You got to have a great partner like you, Bill. You got to have great partners like Bob and Jack. You got to have wonderful support like Bethany and Sydney and the rest of everybody at Colliers. I think sometimes brokers get big egos, and we're only as good as the team. We're only as good as the company. But, it takes obviously hard work. When you're young, you got to be plowing those 60 and 70-hour work weeks in. And certainly I think gaining skill sets that your other brokers don't have. It's sometimes hard to differentiate yourself, and sometimes clients see us as a commodity. And Bill, you and I both know we've spent our careers adding to our tool belts to separate ourselves from the competition. So I think early on, doing things, getting different certifications, even getting your CCIM and going through, supply chain certifications and understanding the ins and outs of our business on the technical side. Any good broker can cold call somebody and negotiate another month of free rent or another penny or two off the shell. But it's the sophisticated broker that understands logistics and supply chain and all the technical things to really, really help clients. So I think, the old adage is hard work and work hard and it'll pay off.
Definitely. Well, Jack and Bob and Matt, awesome job today. We hope everyone found this insightful. Brokerage is a wonderful, wonderful industry. I don't think any of us would do anything differently. I turned down an NFL career to do brokerage, so but it's great, guys. Very insightful stuff today. We hope everybody enjoyed it, and we'll be coming out with another podcast here soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.